And we are live. Another VC Wisdom Pod, could be also CEO Wisdom Pod, because we have both today. Idowu Akinde. Idowu is in Lagos, Nigeria right now. And yeah, he's a VC. He invests in a bunch of startups. He leads Boolean Labs. He's CEO at that company, also founder. He's a startup mentor at various respected institutions, Techstar. I certainly know Startup Wise Guy and the whole bunch. There's also Founder Institute, which I'm also mentored there, quote unquote. It's interesting, right? The word mentor. Do I want to call myself a mentor? I don't know. But talking about you, Idowu, ID, tell me a bit more about yourself, your background. Please introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you very much, Charles. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for doing this and making this kind of channel available to people that are coming up and curious to learn. Okay, so I often like to introduce myself to founders, right? The majority of people that I work with as a fellow founder. This is because I'm a three-time founder, someone with whom they can stand or sit shoulder to shoulder and just share whatever problems that they might be going through, problems, challenges, knotty issues. And perhaps I can draw into my experience, multiple experiences, many of them negative, not all of them positive, and give them, perhaps a way to think about what they are working through that they haven't thought about before. So far, over 1,500 founders in 15 countries on 4 continents have found this friendly, no airs, no boo, no BS approach really, really useful, through the feedback that I get. And in a nutshell, that's kind of what I do. Thank you.
For people, context here, you're in Lagos, Nigeria right now. It's 9:30 p.m. on a Sunday. You're still hustling. So that's the kind of person that you are, just for the audience right there. Tell us about the first startups that you built and the ones that failed, the one that won, and the lessons that you have taken along the way.
Okay. I have built and sold a startup in the edtech space, something that was perhaps 10 years ahead of its time, at least in this market, because nowadays that I've exited that market, that kind of solution is all over the place now. It's really, really proliferated. I think that in general, across all of my experiences, I think the one thing that stands out really, really, really for me is that the startup experience, the startup building experience, the startup journey, as I like to call it, has really, really solidified for me that failure is my best friend. Failure is nothing but a platonic objective data point on the XY graph that is my life, right? Failure, the event, doesn't have to become failure, the identity, So in a nutshell, I think that, just at a very, very high level, and we can go into details, we can talk about a lot of experiences, but I think that over time, I have kind of become this, I won't exactly call it crocodile skin. Instead, I'd call it mentally resilient, okay, another failure, thank you very much. Dust it off and let's move on, right? Because it's literally impractical to stay and sulk or dwell upon any failure event, because that's exactly what it is. It's an event. If we really, really want to take this, kind of like you take algebra at one level and then you take differential equations at another level. If you want to take this to another level, we could say that success is also just a data point, right? Because at the end of the day, if you set out a goal and you achieve that goal, you call that success. It's just a data point. If you dwell too much on it, it might get into your head and affect your future successes, But just to stay on that single point, failure is a data point. Failure is my best friend. Failure tells me that there is something to reflect upon, to examine, to analyze. And if it has variables that can be configured or reconfigured, then I can iterate. I can do that same thing again with a different configuration of the variables and expect a different result. And if I can try long enough, statistically possible, I will hit one combination that will work, statistically speaking. So if I can speak like that, if I don't sound too much like a nerd.
No, that is fully my mindset. Don't be afraid of sounding like a nerd and quoting science there, because that's the greatest way to go. I think, school has really nailed down way too much in our minds that if you failed, you're not good, that's the curse that they stacked in our brain, like with with a hammer. We have nails in our brain, and every time we go there in the failure zone, we think we're gonna die. We think we're no good. Our identity falls away, and that's quite bad. And I often talk about reforming the system. I think school overdid pain, and kind of made nice soldiers out of us. But what we need in this war of life is to be generals, especially at the executive level. Once we're founders and we are managing systems, softwares, employees. Like you said, I think it's always been a piece of data, this failure, but never has it been so strong in our mind. And if you dive into evolution of things, well, males, for example, when they go for females, they dance and then they fight. But even after losing, do they feel that disappointed? I mean, they run away and they go train some more, they go hunt some more, and they will go at it again. They don't spend their time in a dark corner, depressing and just not doing anything. So I think it's really the school that caused that. You had various startups, you failed quite a lot. Some of them also succeeded. What were these successes, and why do you think you were so successful in these?
Okay. The one that I'd like to highlight is a talent marketplace. The reason why I'd like to highlight it is that the big factor, right? I think the single biggest factor in the success of that particular one is that it was the startup that I built by leveraging the most the capital, the social capital, the human capital that was around me. In other words, there's this African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, then you go together, go as a team. I think that this particular experience espoused this principle the most, in the sense that today, even though I'm not actively involved with that company anymore, I've left it for other people to manage, it still is running and it's doing well. And, on an annual basis, I go in there to support them, with some mentoring, some masterclasses and stuff. But, I have this good feeling because, hey, this was the one with which I think that I leveraged the most the principle of teamwork, the principle of working as a team and leveraging the strengths of each person on the team. It's a dev studio / talent market space, a marketplace which helps to provide technical resources for startups, many of the people that I work with, to show up their deficiencies technically in the teams. And it's based in
What do
Nigeria.
you mean by teamwork? Is it hire the right talent? Is it the chemistry between each? Is it like intimately knowing one another? Okay, I'm doing that, you can pick up there, and then we all meet up kind of and synergize our energy for greater energy expenditure in the end.
So I think it's that last point majorly, and then I'll add something to it. I think it's majorly that last point, which is synergizing resources, thinking of a team as an assemblage of compatible components, right? And allowing each component to do its work, as it were, without necessarily interfering or jeopardizing the efficiency or effectiveness of any of those components. And therein lies perhaps a tip to the point that I said I was going to add. I think that the concept of psychological safety, right, the concept of psychological safety in teams is not emphasized enough. What do I mean by psychological safety? Psychological safety is the feeling of is the assurance that even when you fail and when you goof, you will not be judged and you will not receive negative consequences for those things by your teammates. And if you think about it, right, all of us, if we think about all the teams that we've been in, perhaps when we're in paid employment or working for other people, we find out that, if you think of it as a spectrum, absolute zero psychological safety and a lot of psychological safety. The teams wherein we've worked that tilt more towards a high degree of psychological safety are the most productive teams. They're the most, come with your quirkiness, come with your stuttering, come with your, whatever it is that you are, just come as you are, right?
I think I lost you. So I'll let you know when you are back. Maybe I can pick up on what you were saying until then. So yeah, psychological safety. There's probably an equilibrium. So obviously if someone stutters and does not know how to communicate properly and, just making fun of that person or just telling them easy thing like go fix your problem, and especially in front of others, might make that person like uneasy and psychologically unsafe. But when it comes to corrections, for example, of, hey, maybe you should think about that. Oh, as a leader, you can tell me, like what you think about my performances, and going 360 and going higher on that scale of feedback and making it really open and accepted to give and receive feedback. I think these are high functioning team. And it's quite interesting also the concept of teams and high functioning teams. I believe they're really close. I believe they spend a lot of time in the same room. We have always built virtual businesses, and these virtual businesses, for example, I think it's harder to get that cohesion, that love, that trust, and that feeling that we're team hunting together. And I'm not about to make, these physical teams happen, because I believe much more in efficiency and dealing with like high level humans. And yeah, we're still waiting for ID. Are you back? I think you are.
I think so. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. So I was covering you while you were absent so that the live stream doesn't stop. But I was just commenting, on building like highly efficient teams. I read the book by Shane Snow. I forgot the title, and I've been struggling, to be honest, to build high performance team on my end. I've worked and hired over 1,000 folks over the past decades, and there's probably 3 of them remaining at the moment, and it's mostly bots, and that makes me happy. It makes me happy because I know how hard humans are to deal with. I know that my businesses are built in some special way. I am still bullish on humans, but with the ones that should partner with me or should co-found businesses, I believe that anyone not having stakes in the business or not having rev share at least should be bots, because I don't think humans have their incentives aligned for the long-term well-being of companies. They do have their incentives aligned with their own well-being, which is totally normal. But yet, like, as I keep talking about that on podcasts, I'm not getting like much good feedback out of these theses of mine. But yeah, the short term, it's like working with highly entrepreneurial folks. I want to ask you though about the VC side of things. Who are you investing in nowadays? Is it only in Africa? What regions of Africa? What product are you bullish on, and what market fit are you seeing currently in Africa?
Okay. Okay. So there is a trap in the world of VC called general solicitation. So if you permit me, I may not be able to say more than a scanty few words, about the fund that I'm currently building, because the fund is not yet fully closed. When it's fully closed, then the website will be populated with a lot of information. The website is deliberately scanty now because that's the rule around the world, general solicitation. So Boolean Capital is launching Fund 1, which is, let me just say, like I said, to avoid general solicitation, which has special interest in clean tech and renewable energy. Okay. To answer the last bit of your question, we can talk about startup trends, VC trends, investment trends generally, especially in Africa. If you think about it, right, in Africa, okay, there has been a huge influx of capital, right, in the last 3 years, right, compared to the previous years. In fact, in 2021, the total startup capital that flowed into the continent from overseas, total capital raised on the continent, domestic and foreign, was about $5 billion, which was more than two times the entire history, right? 2020 and beyond. In 2022, it became about 6.5 billion. It has been projected to be something around 8 billion for this year. But what's my point? If you analyze that huge funding. Now it's quite small. We're not in delusion. It's less than 1% of global startup fundraising, but at least it's much more than where we're coming from. So we're happy that we're making progress. Now, the point I want to make about that is, if you analyze it, you find that 80 to 85% of those numbers are coming from offshore, off continent. And so you then ask yourself, as somebody who has lived all his life in Africa, I ask myself, does this mean that there are no compatible investors on the continent? I don't think so, right? I think that what has happened is that the demography of people who have generated or built wealth on the continent have done so from other asset classes than venture, right? So this is something that Boolean Labs, my company, is working on. We are, through one of our components, the Funding Lab, we're planning to have a series of investor reorientation interventions. In other words, we want to be able to help elevate the thinking of the average HNI, high net worth, and or middle class, African person, so that they start to see that many of these opportunities for funding that are being snapped up by foreigners, they themselves could intervene. They could catch many of these opportunities early on, and they could be the ones to get the returns on investment. So that's something that we're working on. Happy to chat more about that perhaps a little time.
Yeah, just love if we can focus on the question, what niches are hot in Africa right now? What are you seeing? For example, I interviewed Shekel on my pod the other day. You know them probably. They're like a YC company. The founders are quite cool, quite colorful. They called me from their Lexus G class or L class, LS class. So they were very fun to interview. Plus, they shared tons of insights. They address dealership financing and so forth, which I think is genius. Africa is sort of catching up to the rest of the market nowadays, and they're leveraging the second biggest leverage in history, which is finances and software. In the case of Shekel, what other niches are we seeing going into hyper growth in Africa. We've seen peer-to-peer lending. We've seen like a lot of fintech, I believe, in Africa. What else are we seeing?
Okay. So just off the top of my head, the three biggest sources of startup data, startup activity, monitoring startup activity on the continent, reported near uniform results, high-level results last year. 2022, we saw 39% of funding go to fintech, and we understand that, that's okay. Guess what was second? Okay, clean tech at 18%. Okay, clean tech came in second at 18%, and then mobility came in third at 13%. After that, you have things like electronic, social, mobile commerce, and then other sectors. But those are the top three sectors right now. So you have fintech. Fintech is still growing strong, and I think that the reason why fintech is still growing strong is that if you think about it, actually, finance, not necessarily payments, payments and other things, comprising the bigger term finance, the superset finance, is kind of like the operating system of an economy, right? So people and businesses are going to need ways to make and receive payments, assess each other's creditworthiness, just provide infrastructure and rails that guide payments. So fintech is big, and the African continent is 54 fragmented pieces, right? So it's not like North America, or it's not like the US that is 50 states, but they kind of have some uniform code. Africa is 54 states, and each of them has a unique legislation, right? So fintech is important, right? But people are starting to see that fintech might be getting to a degree of saturation. And as you know, VC is an outlier game. VC is a game where you make the highest returns if you can spot the pattern before the rest of the crowd, right? So a few people have spotted that perhaps the next hot sector is clean tech. And clean tech is another superset, a super word for renewable energy, a little bit of agriculture, environmental sustainability and stuff like that, right? So that's the next thing that's coming up, and people are really, really paying attention to that. And then we have mobility, so.
And what startups did you invest in or are advising? Can you shout out to?
Okay, so I can't give information about the investments yet because they are still in the pipeline. So perhaps this time in 2 to 3 months, I would be glad to make all the noise in the world. But
are they fintech?
That's fine. But I have worked with a few really, really, really remarkable startups. I'll just try and pick a few just off the top of my head right now. There is Beta Store, which is a Founder Institute graduate. There is Scrap Haze, which is also a Founder Institute graduate, but we also did some personal work with them in Boolean Labs. There is Sose Renewable Energies, which is biotech, so it's slightly off-center, slightly eccentric, off-center, but it is worthy of mention. Helix Biogen actually has a COVID-19 vaccine candidate registered on the WHO website, right? Perhaps there's no resources, there's no capital, there's no political capital to push it further, but at least it did the work to make sure that they have a COVID-19 release candidate there. There's also Sose Renewable Energies, which has really, really, really shot up in terms of valuation multiples with some assistance from Boolean Labs and Impact Hub. So those are just a few. There's many, 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 many more, but these are just a few just off the top of my head.
Right. I'm going to throw a couple of ideas here as an outsider. And yeah, I'm still very much of an outsider. I did interview a bunch of African founders this year, but first I interviewed this AI guy that was building AI apps for other companies. This guy specifically, can he be competitive? Potentially. I just don't think that Africa can compete in the AI world vs other markets, for example, like India, which is getting developed, or San Francisco, which is on the very high quality side of things, or for example, Canada, in which the government gives you a bunch of grants to actually create your business. Not saying that this helps, but yeah, I think African startups should focus on Africa, serving Africa as a market. For example, Nigeria, it's growing like crazy. We mentioned fintech. I think I would build a startup in the realm of trust and identification and validating that this person is trustworthy. Their credit score, I mean, it would be obviously better than a credit score. It would be like just better data about that person, showing that they have a job, that they have good values, and they're not trying to cheat. Because Africa is still at this stage, it's still at the trust stage. People do not trust the government. They do not trust peers often. So I think I'd build something in that. And then probably in the infrastructure realm, building roads, but with a technological edge, and I would gather massive funds. Two questions in one for you. What do you think about that, one? And two, I believe that they need to be social startups. I don't believe much in charity. Is Bill and Melinda Gates, like, what are they currently doing in Africa? Do you feel they have an impact? Because I believe they do invest in social startups. So let's start with the first question. Like, what do you think about my ideas that I threw there?
Okay. So I think that you are spot on. I personally have a soft spot for ideas or solutions that are infrastructure oriented by design, right? So when you talk about a road is a device that enables a lot of vehicles carrying people to move, from point to point, right? Point A to point B to C, D, E, F, G. If you take that concept to, for instance, technology or payments, right? Payments need to move from Lagos State to Abuja, Kano State to Port Harcourt, right? All of these are states, locations within Nigeria. If there is somebody who is building the equivalent of a road, which is kind of like the infrastructure that enables or makes easier and more seamless the transportation of payments information across, technically speaking, destinations, then I have a soft spot for that. Now, like I said, we could transpose this to, as we just did payments, we could transpose it to hiring, we could transpose it to, all sorts of sectors, right? But usually when people are building infrastructure type things, that's something that has immense potential for scale. It has immense potential for volume, which helps the unit economics. And that's also
like a smart highway. And I mean, this has been attempted before in other places in the world, but these industries, they're known for corruption. For example, in Canada, it was the mafia that would get like a bunch of contracts, and they would give out envelopes with cash in them, and they build shitty highways. Well, not highways, but like roads. Highways work like with more trustful people, I believe, and there's always corruption there. So how about this a smart highway, with sensors? Okay, you have this micro tag on your motorcycle, then you can ride it. If not, then use another road. In Mexico, for example, we see these people in the street filling out potholes literally with cement and asking for money in the street, and that's pretty cool. How about digitizing that, Okay, you're gonna register yourself and make it less bureaucratic. Every hole that you fill with that cement solution, that approved cement solution, you get paid $1. A smart highway. I don't think this has been done before in my native Canada. Again, we heard of that bridge, that a bunch of investors have paid for. You pay it's quite expensive. Every time you pass the bridge, you pay like $5. So if you pass twice, or even 10. So if you pass twice, they send you a bill of like $20. And that is done, by the way. That is because they couldn't get their costs together, right? And the irony here is that they're not even profitable. So I think it would be pretty cool to find a way to build roads in a very cheap fashion and have tech into it and track everything. And obviously that sounds very naive by someone that know that, but I think everything is possible. And I think people that attempt these moonshots with their naivete, I think they have a shot at making it.
Precisely. So naivete, right, is exactly the requirement that is required, because it means the naive person does not carry the baggage of knowledge. Is not cursed with
limitations,
knowledge.
stress, and everything
Yeah.
that comes with it. Negative momentum.
Yeah, thank you. So I like that idea, right? Smart highways, because and it kind of points me towards something. So if you think about Africa, right? I've granted a few interviews and or live sessions like this where we discussed Africa, right? And sometimes I've thrown the question open. When you hear the word Africa, what comes to your mind? And people usually respond with things like, lack, deficiency, poverty, that kind of stuff. But it's that thing. And so the irony is that this presents an opportunity. And let me explain. The fact that there's so much deficiency in health infrastructure, education infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, power infrastructure, all of these areas actually means that if you are going to solve these problems on the African continent in the 21st century in 2023, you cannot or you shouldn't be thinking about how they were solved in North America 2 centuries or 3 centuries in the late 1700s and or early 1800s. You can't be thinking about the kind of cement mixture that was used to build those highways, because that's not the available knowledge of the time. That's not the state-of-the-art knowledge of the time, or technology of the time. So my take is that people who are building solutions for the African continent should remember that, hey, this is the 21st century. As much as possible, we should be doing it as best as it could be done, so that we then become a model for other places. Thank you for that thought.
I love that. By the way, when I think of Africa, I think of safaris, I think about beauty, and I think about startup opportunity. I think about a shitload of money. That's what I think about. That's why I just love these Silicon Valley company that got funded and are starting from scratch. They literally have their little lab back there or their warehouse, and they think everything from scratch. And that is just beautiful because first they innovate, and every innovation breakthrough that they might go through, first it can be done quicker and better than before at a lower cost. They can resell that IP to another company. Plus, it gives them a potential moonshot for their own company. So how about doing that in Africa? For example, when we think of smart highways, well, what minerals are available in Africa for cheap? Can we use those to build the highways? Can we have a backbone app with a super easy UX? We need geniuses to think about that so that the end user, even if they're not used to that, well, they just go on the app and they click yes, no, and there it's done. We've seen company in Latam, for example, like Rappi, which I use pretty much every day to order my food. Well, that's a good example of stupid simple. It's a complicated company. I'm not sure. It's quite intense to run that company because they manage I don't know, at least 1 million delivery people on a daily basis. They have outages and so forth, but they literally recreated an economy, right? How many delivery people with these Rappi bag do we see here in Latam? So, and these guys have had to take everything from scratch, everything, the price per item, the checkout at the line, and so forth. So lots of innovation. And I think, yes, that Africa can be the land of opportunity for that. Last question for you, Idit. What do you think is next for Africa in the next 5 to 10 years? Do you think we're going to see that innovation en masse? Do you think we're going to see huge companies, unicorns come out of Africa and probably spread even out to the rest of the world? What do you think is going to happen?
I think so. Referencing two things that you said earlier, earlier when you said Africans should be building for Africa, that's number one. Number two, what I just said about the fact that a deficiency means that the potential for upside is actually higher than other places, right? So I have shared this worldview, this opinion, right, at a couple of places. I think that this generation of Africans, right, young people, have a unique opportunity. Africa is where it is today because the generations before us, the generation of our parents and those before us, largely outsourced the building of the society, right? Thinking mega high level now, not micro low level. Largely outsourced the building of society, when you think about the big building blocks, to governments, right? And unfortunately, those governments have failed for the last few decades, more than a few decades. And so when I see people volunteer, and by volunteer, I mean somebody stands up and says, hey guys, I am volunteering to fix the talent shortage problem or tech talent shortage problem. Another person says, I'm volunteering to fix the transportation payments problem. Another person says, I'm volunteering to fix the creditworthiness problem. I'm volunteering to fix the mobility problem, with e-bikes, What's happening is that I can see, I'm really bullish in Africa. I can see that what's happening is that these are the things that were previously, these are the building blocks that I referred to that were previously outsourced by the general population to the governments of African countries and regions, a few decades ago. But what's happening is that the new generation, the young people, are not thinking about outsourcing it anymore because, we heard stories from our parents, we're tired, we're frustrated. We really, really feel like, look, we can do what we can do, right? And there are opportunities. And so if you ask me, I will tell, I predict, right? I'm no prophet, but I predict that these people that are volunteering to fix many of these big building blocks may not even have any idea the scale or the size of what they're building today will become in the future. Because the bigger a problem, right? Meaning the more severe a problem and the more the number of people that you can find that are experiencing that problem, the higher the probability that they're going to become a billionaire building the solutions to that problem, right? So I think that we are going to see quite a good number of unicorns, right? I think so, literally. This new wave that I just described of people standing up and volunteering to fix many of the building blocks, I think started around 5, 6, maybe 7 years ago, 2015, 2016, thereabout, right? And so the average startup to IPO turnaround time is about 10 to 12 years, right? So somewhere in the next 3 to 4 and beyond, I believe that we're really, really going to see a greater number of unicorns on the continent that are really, really unicorns by solving problems, not necessarily by inflated valuations. But I'm bullish, I'm positive. Thank you so much.
Same here. I believe, well, if I can point in one specific directions, I'm even more bullish about the trend of communities throughout the world. So like what you're part of ideas, a startup community, so you need to keep on building that startup community, increase, because what is a community? It's broader exchange of communication. It's like wires, but that are like intertwined way more tightly than the population at large. Information is shared at greater quality and quantity, and trust is even greater in those community, So I think we need to go all in communities. We need like the backbone for these communities. Is it like a Facebook group, a Slack group, to exchange more quantity and more quality of information, increase the trust in there. Only trusted actors can stay there. And yeah, power to the people, like I've never really believed in any governments, although yeah, obviously they've done good historically, but in most cases, in most countries, especially advanced economies, it's time to kind of let go most probably of these governments, in my opinion, and privatized most of the systems, even your health, you know. I mean, if I go in an ambulance, then I should pay this private ambulance. Why is the government going to help me for that? But yeah, there should be technology. They shouldn't charge me a shitload, you know. And that's why they need competition. They need someone undercutting them. That's why they need to offer a payment plan if I get really sick and so forth. Anyway, I believe that, yeah, communities is definitely the future where we need to put our attention, help one another go win-win, you know, and start smaller, I think. So yeah, very bullish on Africa on my end too. Glad to have had you on today, Idowu. Where can people find out more about you and your company?
Okay, so thank you so much for the time today. This was a really enjoyable session. We're available. I have an active profile, and we as a company also are very active on LinkedIn majorly. We also have a presence on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, but it's LinkedIn majorly. And if you just search for Boolean Labs, you'll see our name there. If you search for Idowu Akinde,